This episode of Resilience in Relationships is sponsored by the Set Me Free Project. Hello, and welcome to Resilience in Relationships. We're so glad that you're here. You see, I've got Zuzu here with me. I should probably say I'm Stephanie Olson. I'm also here with
Rebecca Saunders.
We have a special guest with us, Patricia, and we are so excited to hear from her and her wisdom. Patricia, why don't you just share a little bit about yourself and who you are and what experience that you have that you're bringing to us today?
I'm a retired forensic psychologist, and I wrote a book about childhood sexual abuse and narcissistic trauma. And it was a memoir, so it was kind of difficult to write, but I got through it, and it was therapeutic in the process.
That's great.
I do things later in life. I got my bachelor's degree in 1986. I got my master's degrees in the 2000s, and I got my doctorate when I was 55 years old.
That is amazing. Good for you. That is great. I love it. And that's hard work, and work that can really be challenging, triggering at any given moment. And we'll definitely get some information on your book at the end and share it for people. But to start, your memoir, which is called We Were a Nice Normal Family, speaks to the reality that a lot of survivors face. And when they appear kind of healthy on the outside, not so healthy on the inside, or going through very difficult things on the inside and looking very different than how others perceive us. But what was it that inspired you to share your story? And what did you want others to see in it?
To be really honest, I decided late in life I wanted to write. And so I signed up for a writing thing online, and it was write your memoir. And I thought, well, I'll go ahead and write this. I don't have anything to say. But then I started writing it, and I was like, my gosh, I do have something to say. And I decided that I wanted to have everybody else have an opportunity to be aware of that and know that they are not alone, like I felt I was for so many years.
Wow. I love that. And writing is so healing. Just being able to put that stuff down on paper, computer, whatever it may be, is just a really healing thing. So as a psychologist and someone who has lived experience as well, you really do see trauma from two different perspectives. We have talked about that very frequently, people doing this work and people with lived experience. How do you think that, excuse my dog here, but how do you think that has shaped the way you understand healing? So from both perspectives, how has that shaped the way you see things?
I think it's a good combination, because I step back and I take a look, and then I write about what's going on. And then I think, wait a minute, that's what this is. So it's kind of an overall thing that changes over time. But like you said, it's therapeutic to write about it.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I find it really interesting, too, that at the beginning you didn't think you had a story worth sharing. And then you realize, no, I really do. And I think that a lot of people could probably relate to that. Once you start actually talking about what has happened in your life, there could be a lot there. And something that people don't always acknowledge, too, is whenever you suffer childhood trauma in any form, that can have lasting effects across the course of your life. As you were writing, did you have any of those kind of aha moments of, wow, like this is connected?
Yeah.
I think it was very beneficial for me to be a psychologist and to look at the process of what was going on as I was writing it. And it was kind of an aha experience at times when I would put something down. I think, wait a minute, that goes back to my training in such and so and so. And I know where that comes from.
Yeah. I have a degree in psychology, and I think oftentimes people ask, why did you go into psychology? And really there was a lot of reasons of, I really want to find out what's wrong with me. And so I think sometimes that experience can really help. But when you're talking about complex trauma, we do a lot of trauma-informed training in our work, and we talk about trauma, and trauma is trauma, but there are different forms of trauma. Can you define complex trauma and why that is so damaging for individuals?
Complex PTSD is a lot more damaging than just PTSD because complex PTSD starts generally in your childhood and it's pervasive over time, whereas normal PTSD can be like an accident, one-time accident, and you have an effect of that. But you don't live your whole life that way. And that's the way I did. I lived my whole life from the beginning with the complex trauma.
Did you recognize that there were things different with your family, or was that just your family norm?
That was the norm. I thought everybody's family had somebody in there that liked to participate in sex. And I didn't realize until I was 27 years old and my therapist told me that I had been sexually abused. Because I was just positive everybody's family had somebody like that. So it was a surprise for me.
I think that is an experience that more people have than others may realize. When this is something where it's just your family system, that's how we figure out what normal is by watching our families and growing up. I think it's important for everyone to know, even if something abusive has happened to you, you may not even recognize that it's abuse until much later. And
you probably won't.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love your willingness to share, because I think that sharing that and sharing your story and kind of your process of discovering, hey, this is abusive, that did happen to me, is going to be beneficial to so many other people.
I hope so. That's my intent, is to get the word out so that people realize that's what's going on in a lot of families. And a lot of families have suffered because of it, but they don't recognize it.
You know, I heard a story of somebody who was in their young teen years and abused by an adult. That is definitely sexual assault. And yet they still to this day don't see it as that. They see it as learning from this older person. And I think that can be a very common thing where we kind of have those stereotypes or those set ideas of what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, what is sexual assault, what is not sexual assault. And sometimes I think it takes that kind of, support person around them to say, what happened to you was not okay. And that could be really challenging for many people. I know I experienced that myself when I had experienced sexual assault quite a few times during my young adulthood and teen years. And yet I thought it was my fault. And so it wasn't until much later on in my life that I realized, oh, that's what that was. And so that's a really challenging thing for so many individuals. How would you speak to somebody who has experienced that and is now just finding out, whoa, this wasn't something that I participated in. This was something that happened to me.
They need to realize that they're not at fault. They shouldn't be ashamed for it because they were not the person that created the havoc in their life. And they need to start talking to somebody, whether it's a therapist or the hotlines that are available for this type of thing, or somebody. They need to start talking about it and getting it out into the open that it had happened.
What would you say to someone who isn't sure if what they've experienced crosses that line? So maybe they're just at the beginning of questioning, like, I don't know if this is normal for other families, or I don't know if the thing that happened to me should have happened, but they're not quite certain. What advice would you give them?
I'd tell them to contact one of the hotlines and talk to somebody about it and see what it is that they think about it, see if they feel that it is abuse or if it wasn't abuse. And that way they can kind of set their mind free, and then they can move on to getting help if that's necessary.
So you said you were 27 when you really started to have that understanding this wasn't typical for every family. What was it that started you on that healing journey?
When the therapist told me that, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've got some work to do now. And learning more about it, it was helpful to make sense of it and how it came about and how it affected me in my life and my relationships in my life. And that was very important to me because I began to open up and look at it and I think, wait a minute, this person is gaslighting me, or this person is not telling me the truth, or they're being controlling or whatever. So I didn't know up front about those things. I had to learn about it through the process.
I'm glad you brought that up because gaslighting, which I always tell people where that came from, that was an amazing movie in the 40s where a husband was trying to make his wife go crazy, turning off and on the gaslights. But we use that phrase so often. And we also use the phrase narcissist quite often. Like they're a narcissist. That's what I would love for you to talk about that a little bit and talk about what a narcissist is, what a narcissist maybe isn't, and what gaslighting can look like.
I think that narcissism is an overriding personality style, and some, usually men, or a lot of times men, women can have it too, but they tend to want to have everything about themselves. It's all me, me, me. And if it doesn't happen this way, then it's not okay. I think that the gaslighting is something that happens when people get into a situation where they want to have everything happen for them. And they have to start lying about stuff in order to make up for that.
Right. Do you see narcissism as a true personality disorder, or does everyone have some traits of narcissism? Are there people who are narcissistic and yet don't have a true personality disorder?
I think there are people who have personality disorders, and there are people who have parts of the personality that aren't totally narcissistic. What I found in my relationships with my brother-in-law, who was a perpetrator, he was a misogynist as well. And that's a person who doesn't like women. They don't feel that they have a place in the world, and everything they do is against what women are about, and women are play toys. So that was what I grew up with, was that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
That those ideals that we're introduced to at a young age can have such a profound impact on how we grow up to see the world too. And that can be why we see abuse perpetuated again and again. Might be because someone was abused. Obviously, not everyone who has been abused will turn to be an abuser, but it does happen sometimes. And I think we see that with thought patterns too, of whenever we are introduced to something so early on. So you talked about how your brother-in-law was misogynistic. You might see that and say, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I do not hold that mindset. But we also see that's normal. Now that's what I believe. Why do you think that is, how people can have different responses?
What happens to people when they're growing up sets the tone for it. Like I grew up as a child from the age of 6 with this happening, and I didn't know any better until I was 27. So it was over time that it became obvious to me that these things were not okay and that they were really difficult to deal with.
There's a new thing in the world on socials, but it's called the manosphere, where men are really coming together. Men like Andrew Tate are really coming together to bring across that misogynist message that women are only used for a certain thing, or women should be the eye candy for men, or whatever it may be. And it's really becoming a very pervasive thing among social media and among some of our young men now. How do you think that is going to translate and affect society in this type of way, and with sexual abuse and sexual assault and things like that?
I've not heard that before, and that sounds very scary to me, because already every 68 seconds there's a sexual assault in the United States on somebody. So I think it's really important if people see that kind of thing going on, they need to maybe do something about it, or make some comments about it, address the situation, because we can't let that happen.
When it comes to recovery, that can be such a daunting word, even to try to define what does recovery look like. I think that from what I've seen from my own experience and also friends, sometimes there can be that pressure of like, okay, I want to heal and I want to heal today. I need to be recovered from this today. And what would you say to someone who is maybe struggling with some pressure there?
I'd say that it's going to take time. They need to be in it for the long haul. Even after years and years of processing and going through it, you're still going to have certain symptoms and things. I have hypersensitivity where if somebody walked in the room and I didn't expect that, I would probably scream or go, ah. And I also have an anger thing where I get so frustrated sometimes that I just cannot do something. That I got an Amazon box one day and they put an Amazon in another Amazon box and it was so tight I couldn't get it out. And I was so angry with that. I threw it on the floor and I kicked it across the room. Finally, my husband came home and took it apart for me. But it's just things like that I realize are still part of that thinking process, that anger, that frustration that I felt as a child.
That's a really great point. And yes, I love Amazon, but have been mad at them a few times for sure. I think that to that point, that is a really important piece. One of the things that I speak on quite a bit is helping or serving others through your healing and not your trauma. And that is challenging and isn't a completed sentence. And so to your point, Rebecca, that and yours, Patricia, healing is ongoing. I don't think it's something like, okay, I'm good. I'm not going to be affected by this ever again. When there is sexual violence and especially complex PTSD, we're talking about a lifetime of healing. There are things that are really, truly a part of that recovery piece. And yet there are people or there are times when you're at the place where, okay, now you can serve others. Now you can really be effective. And sometimes maybe that is not something you should do or ready to do because there is so much trauma that you need to get through first and bring some healing. I've seen people who serve others out of their trauma and pain, and it winds up being more harmful than it can be helpful. Can you speak to that at all?
Well,
yeah.
I think that people need to have their own process going on and have it really processed well before they start going into helping other people like that.
Yeah, I think most people don't even realize that they're doing it when they're doing it. But yeah, I've definitely seen that. So if there is somebody, Patricia, who is listening today who feels overwhelmed or wants to take the next step of healing or is even just recognizing, okay, that may have happened to me, what message of hope would you leave them?
There is hope and there is a way out, and they need to start finding it, start taking action. If it means calling the hotlines and starting there, they can help. But begin working on it. You know, he can't become not an alcoholic unless he admits that he drinks. Right. So it's kind of like that. They have to admit that there's something wrong and admit that it was a big thing.
Yeah.
And they can get through it.
Absolutely. That there is something that is a problem doesn't necessarily mean it's that individual's fault. And certainly when we're talking about sexual abuse, sexual violence, it is not your fault. And it is important to get help and that there is hope. You're absolutely right. There is a way beyond it. And it does take a tremendous amount of work. You're never done with that recovery, with that healing, but there is absolutely hope. Yeah. That's great.
You spoke earlier, Patricia, about kind of learning more, and that was helpful to you. I found that that's helpful for me too, to hear other people's stories. And so I think that that's a resource that is sometimes overlooked too. Yeah. Hey, let me see how someone else has gotten through this and look at how different their life has been and what their healing process has looked like. And you may find things that help you that you never expected.
I'm comforted by some of the reviews that I've gotten where people say that they really felt like I understood them and they really felt like they were in the story themselves and they could identify with it. That really means a lot.
It's amazing.
That's beautiful. That's how you know it's making a positive difference too. I love that. So where can our listeners find your book?
On Amazon. I guess you could ask for it at Barnes & Noble or some of those places, but definitely Amazon. It's both on, it's just currently on paperback and Kindle right now. I am in the process of doing audio, so that'll be coming along soon, I hope.
Audiobook. That's great.
That is wonderful.
Will it be your voice or are you working with a voice actor?
I had a voice do it.
That's wonderful.
I love it. On that, as a mom, I have so many books that I'm always wanting to read and I can't always get to them. So I really appreciate it when authors take that step of making it an audiobook too.
That is so exciting. So where can our listeners find?
Website is patriciagrinnell.com. You're welcome to go take a look at it. It's got all of my podcasts on it and information about me, and you can sign up for a free trauma guide. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Substack. So any one of those places you could find me.
Wonderful. And we will put all of those links in our show notes. This was great. And thank you for using your trauma to really make a difference in other people's lives. I think it's so beautiful. We're not all called to do that, but when what was meant for evil can be turned to good, it's such an amazing thing to see that. And so thank you for what you're doing to help people. Anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Think of anything else. They just need to be aware that there is hope, that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and head towards it. Don't give up.
Don't give up. That is really great. We talk about resilience here, and resilience is taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and 3 steps forward and 4 steps back, and it's picking yourself up when you fall down. And so that is amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, Patricia, and your wisdom. And we are so glad that you're here and that you were able to be a part of our lives today. So we thank you for joining us today. Get some R&R. We'll see you next time. This episode of Resilience in Relationships is sponsored by the Set Me Free Project.